This book has contributed spanning the professions of medicine, medical research, nursing, psychology, and martial arts. I'm Jason Armstrong, and I'm the primary author, and it is a story that became obvious to me over the last 15 years while putting articles and books together on karate. Again and again I kept noticing that the founders of many karate styles were predominantly dying young. For example, Choji Miyagi, founder of Goju, and Kenwa Mabuni, founder of Shito-ryu, both died in the early 60s, and they provide two of the many high-profile examples. So with the team I mentioned, we went ahead and collected the data on 118 lifelong karate practitioners who were either 8th dans, style founders, or style successors. The data clearly showed that they tended to die quite a bit younger than non-karate practitioners in their respective geographic regions. And we also found style differences. We also noted the effect across karateka in the West as well as the East since the decades of World War II up till today. It is an intriguing story, as most people in society have a view of a Yoda-like figure for the masters of the martial arts. That is, someone who lives to a ripe old age and has great wisdom. So on downloadkarate.com, one of our polls asked karate practitioners what they felt their art would do for their lifespan. It turns out that by far most felt it would add 10 years to their lives. So generally, even karateka have a profoundly wrong opinion, as the data shows that it actually takes time off lifespan. And depending on where you live, the perceptions the poll revealed show that most people had an error in their judgment by as much as 15 years from the reality. This is a huge number in terms of longevity, which usually measures effects of lifespan of different activities or lifestyle traits in 2 to 3 year timeframes. In generating the data for the book, we factored in the decade and year senseis died, their geography, and given these variables, at what age they should have died, using what are called life expectancy at birth statistics and life expectancy by age statistics. Although the book focuses on senseis' ages of death in recent decades, we also compared back to the famous karate sensei who were born in the 1800s. Furthermore, we compared the data to Western sports, Olympians, and other martial arts like judo in particular. All of these groups allow us to flush out hypotheses around the variables that may be affecting lifespan, and talk about diagnostics or possible training, behaviours, or changes in other behaviours associated with the culture of martial arts and sports that affect longevity. Doctors practice a system called evidence-based practice, abbreviated to EBP. This is a process of analysing data to decide on a scenario and ultimately prevention or treatment. We as martial artists should also train with an evidence-based practice approach, given recent decades has resulted in the collection of extensive data for street fighting statistics, sports and health. This book is actually the second in a series to be published of 3 books putting data or evidence-based knowledge into the practices of karate. The trilogy is aimed at gathering clinical and university research data for the 3 pillars of karate, known as Shingi Tai in the Japanese language. In Western lingo, Shingi Tai translates to mind, body and spirit. The direct translation is that mind in Japanese is spoken as shin or kokoro, technique as gi or waza, and body as tai or karada. Our first book was the Street Fighting Statistics and Techniques Selection text, providing data for both real-world fights and Dojo Kata Bunkai. This focused on the pillar of gi in Shingi Tai, with its analysis of which techniques work in the streets via police assault data and emergency department hospital data. But it also extended to Tai, as it included the mechanisms of damaging people from a physiological and medical context. In comparison, the second book covers technique type, health and longevity, and while it also has links to the gi in Shingi Tai, its primary focus is Tai, or body. It has been noted that exercise for athletic fitness is not always the same as exercise for health and longevity. Therefore, it's important to look at the intersection of these variables in regards to karate technique, training options, and drills. Furthermore, in the book we analyse the research publications linked to combative psychology, the persona developed through karate, combative environments, and dojo cultural factors that may, according to longevity studies, affect lifespan. Of course, this side of things involves the shin of Shingi-Tai, and while not the major focus of the book, it is a series of topics we cover to create a complete picture. I thank Dr. Sarvin McClinton, a psychologist at the University of South Australia, for his efforts and oversight in the psychology of the book as well as the statistical number crunching. His knowledge is extended by the fact that he has a Shodan in Iaido, a Nidan in Karate, and has lived in Japan for a number of years. But before we talk more about the story behind this, I want to stress that the aim was to create hypotheses as to why lifespan is reduced in karateka, and therefore hopefully provide pathways for thought to enable better outcomes in the decades ahead. Therefore, as I worked on this book, it evolved not only into a text on karate and its effect on longevity, but also a general overview of the effects of exercise, diet, personality, and other variables on lifespan. We must remember that research has shown that our genes only account for 30% of lifespan for those of us that live into our late 80s. Therefore, 70% of longevity is accounted for by lifestyle, habits, and actions. I did have some hesitation in putting this text together, due to the fact it may suggest a significant negative component of studying the martial arts, something I've put multiple hours of effort into almost every day since I began 30 years ago. Personally, I began with a short stint in judo, followed by karate. However, if one notices a truth in an art that seeks enlightenment, be it good or bad, it should be discussed, and hopefully the discussion will lead to better outcomes for karateka moving forward. The question as to what are the negative effects of karate on longevity, and why they override the positive effects of karate on longevity, is not only related to an understanding of what they are, but what are the possible diagnostics to identify them, so that moving forward we have better outcomes on average than the masters that have passed in recent decades. So we suggest some diagnostics in this book. Of course, even outside of the martial arts, the image of a wise karate master reaching an old age appears to be well burned into the mind of most people in society, and the data can be confronting because, in inverted commas, everyone knows of an instructor that lived to a very old age. And this may cause many to argue that karate is in fact healthy in terms of enabling a long life. While by no means of the same severity, such a lack of evidence-based thinking is similar to the arguments that some smokers give, i.e., I know this guy that's been smoking all his life and is now 85. Of course such people exist, but they are the exception to the probable outcome. Funakoshi Sensei, the founder of Shotokan, is a great example of an exception to what the pooled karate longevity data indicate. He lived an amazing life spanning the samurai era in Japan, through 2 world wars, and into the era of jet airplanes and space rockets. But his longevity is an outlier amongst the karateka and their lifespan data. In fact, when one looks at some of his practices, such as banning sparring, which is an inflammation-creating activity, no alcohol consumption, rarely eating meat, etc., there may be many arguments as to why his karate did not negatively affect his longevity, and our data touches and connects these points. I also discussed some interesting statements on the topic by past masters, such as Itosu Unko of the 1800s, Asai Sensei of Shotokan, who openly stated that health may not go hand in hand with Budo, and also some of the opposite views by Goju practitioners. And this just notes 3 of the examples. Different martial arts styles do appear to have different longevity outcomes, and unfortunately I have to report that my own line of karate, Tani Shito-ryu, appears to have the shortest average lifespan of all the styles we compared to, and that was just 60 years. Central medical and sports physiology themes are relevant to the whole topic we've been talking about, and the data we found also showed that drills, technique selection, sparring, kata like sanshin all play roles. For example, In the case of Sanshin, it's typically promoted as a health-giving kata associated with the internal styles of karate. The fact is that when we analyse the lifespans of Okinawan sensei who typically practiced it daily for a lifetime, they in fact had shorter lives than their Okinawan peers who did not practice karate at all. There is, however, little doubt that Sanshin kata enhances one's karate through optimizing breath, technique, connection, and developing the hara and tanden. In this book, we run through the data around Sanshin practitioners, 2 key posture versions of the kata itself, their associated health implications in terms of such things as isometric contraction, thoracic pressure, venous pressure, cardiac output, sports physiology, and if in fact there are any potential benefits of the differing breathing styles taught relating back to the Chinese origins of the kata, and modern research data on health and relaxation and breathing therapy. As a second example, a background-related issue in the book is how we can expect our bodies to perform as we age, and how that relates to karate functions and attributes we need like speed, strength, timing, visual perception, etc. Especially in the latter stages of our typical competition years, often our mid-30s. We also look at what ages do things reach their peak, and how can we compensate in a health-related manner to optimize our karate and health as we age. Interestingly, one of the most noted longevity experts, Dr. Finch from the University of Southern California, proposes that human lifespan depends on 3 interacting variables: inflammation, genetic modulation, and nutrition. Further extending on the idea of inflammation being core to longevity, noted Italian aging researcher Dr. Franceschi believes that aging is all about inflammation, and he has termed the whole process inflammaging. The data we gathered on sparring was intriguing. However, inflammation is not simply a topic related to injuries, but is something that can be influenced by diet and other factors related to longevity, and we tie these together. We also therefore explore a number of the common traits across different past senior karateka that has potentially affected their longevity, considering it as a multifaceted issue. However, getting back to inflammation, given that karateka typically have 2 to 3 inflammatory events concurrently present throughout their entire training period, I certainly did, we pay special attention to inflammation, given the fact that the last 10 years of medical research and practice has shown that inflammation is linked to many terminal diseases. For example, heart disease and some cancers. This link of inflammation to such disease states has now become mainstream medicine. An early example of this was a cover page story in Time magazine back in 2003, where they titled it "Inflammation, the Silent Killer." For the most part, this book is written for the layperson, but it should still contain enough detail to engage a scientist or medical practitioner. And we ploughed through over 270 references, which are all listed in the back of the book, to come to the links and the conclusions we did on top of the data that we generated for the text that was unique. You can go to our webpage to learn more about the topic and potential mitigation strategies for karateka moving forward.